Good evening, my warmest friends. It was so good of you to come all this way. You must be dying to begin. It won't be long now, so rest in peace. I'll be coming for you soon, oh, very soon. Your time has nearly come. Just a little farther now. Oh, roughly 6 feet or so. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I frighten you? Perhaps that was in bad spirit. Try to stay lively. Your wait is at an end. Make yourself comfortable and take one last look behind you. If knowing what's behind you will make you feel any better. As for me, I like to be surprised. Time to cross over now. So step inside my library and welcome to Ghost Stories for Grown-ups. Welcome to our library. Let's begin with Spiritus news from our Dead Files with Mabel.
Hi, I'm Mabel, and this is tonight's news from the Dead Files. Tonight, our Dead Files time machine is whisking us back to the late 1800s in the beautiful Cumberland Mountains, where a rich history of whiskey-fueled murder and mayhem ran its course near a charming little mining town called Mingo Hollow in Kentucky. Dueling banjos, anyone? When mining operations grew in the remote location around the convergence of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, a few industrious mountaineers set up illegal drinking establishments to serve the miners. One mine superintendent reported that around $10,000 would be spent in these bars on payday. That's the equivalent of over $300,000 in today's economy. Cha-ching! These illegal saloons were called blind tigers, due to the early practice of skirting laws on liquor sales by selling tickets to see some natural oddity that couldn't really be proved. And, oh, while you're here, have a free drink! To further complicate enforcement, mountaineers didn't recognize federal authority. There were no real roads to the mining camps, and saloon owners built their establishments literally on top of state boundaries. At the time, states didn't do a very good job of coordinating their efforts. So if Kentucky law showed up, everyone would just take their drinks to the Tennessee side of the bar. If Tennessee law arrived, everyone would make a brief visit to Virginia, and so on, and so forth, and so on, and you get the picture. It was a mess. Isolation, lonely miners, and an ample supply of hooch fueled long-standing blood feuds as rival families set up bar and tried to force each other out of business. Meanwhile, the mining company tried to distance itself from the source, making their employees drunken rage monsters. The ultimate love-to-hate triangle. In one scathing pro-mine article, the author makes a point to distinguish miners from the local mountaineers and describes the locals as distinct, repulsive, and, quote, if you are to windward, you get an odor that will long remain with you, and that puts strange ideas into your philosophy in regard to humanity and animals. With the rise of the Anti-Saloon League and hatchet-wielding temperance ladies vandalizing liquor establishments, even the Kentucky Brewers Association wanted to distance itself from the blind tigers for fear of their respectable establishments being swept up in the tigers' bad reputation. The most notorious blind tiger in the region was the Quarter House, inherited by Lee Turner after his brother, Wild Bill Turner, was murdered in the saloon. The Quarter House, cleverly named so as it was a quarter of the way from town to the mines, frequently appeared in the newspapers around the country. Here's just a small sampling of those articles. Dozens of saloon regulars appeared in print following incidents of violence and murder. After years of illegal alcohol, thievery, dogfighting, kidnapping, prostitution, and killings, a Bell County, Kentucky sheriff organized a posse in 1902 to arrest Lee Turner and his Turnerites. Side note, the sheriff himself was related to the owner of a rival blind tiger called the Halfway House. Da-da-da! The encounter ended as badly as you would predict, with at least 10 killed and the Quarter House being destroyed by fire. Lee Turner managed to mysteriously escape, but it's not known how. Talk about a vanishing act, folks. A few days after the exchange, Turner is reported to have sold the land to the mining company, who in turn promptly announces plans to build a church on the site. Turner surrenders a few days later and is charged with and acquitted of murder when the Turner-friendly court ruled he was out of town when the killings occurred. Over the next 2 decades, Turner would start another saloon, kill a bounty hunter, be arrested and cleared again, be visited in jail by a girl of a rival family, marry rival family girl, start and sell another saloon, hire a playwright to pen a show about his life, star in the traveling show as himself, run for sheriff, suddenly announce he is a fan of temperance, gives evils of whiskey lectures, invests in moving picture equipment to make autobiographical movies, assists in patenting some kind of mining rail, started the medicine and patent promoting company, went bankrupt, be sent to Eastern State Hospital for the insane when he can't stop brooding over the loss of the Quarter House, and dies penniless in the asylum in 1925. Even after the Quarter House burned, many of its regulars fell into their own notoriety, including Rose Gordon, who was killed when a drunk patron was demonstrating how President McKinley was assassinated and shot off 2 of his own fingers as well. What the heck is wrong with these people? But my personal favorite is the story of one-time Lee Turner partner turned rival, Johnny Martin, who started his own saloon. Johnny was accused of killing mountain girl Martha White and skipped town when he heard he was wanted for murder. Meanwhile, a man named John Williams stepped in to manage the saloon, but the bartender Williams hired quit after one night's work, stating that the ghost of Martha White herself had approached the bar and tried to talk to him. Spooksville! In 1901, the Cincinnati Enquirer reported that Williams ran the saloon less than a week, closing it, according to his own statement, because Martha White's ghost haunted the building, and that shrieks and groans resounded all through the night. Numerous witnesses claimed they too watched Martha's ghost reportedly approach the bar. In 1902, enough was enough, and a Bell County judge ordered officials to tear down the Tigers and declared no saloons remained. But I bet you could still pay good money to see a striped pig.
Oui.
So here you have it, folks. Here on the Dead Files, we see a lot of strange, long-winded cases. And this one takes the cake. Would that be rum cake in this case? I don't know. Well, I'll see you next time on the Dead Files, where truth is stranger than fiction. Sorry, did I do that right?
Thank you, Mabel, for that intoxicating summary. Now, please welcome tonight's reader, Hillary Harlan, here to share a story about loss, torture, and new beginnings. How fitting! The story is entitled Lullabelle by Catriona Ward, from the Titan Books collection of shorts entitled Phantoms, Haunting Tales from Masters of the Genre. Time to settle in with whatever beverage warms you and enjoy.
Lullabelle by Catriona Ward. Lula's last words to Irene were, "You stupid old woman." That was on Friday, when she could still speak. Always looking at me with those cow eyes. No wonder I'm ill. "I hope you get better soon, Lula," said Irene, and took her sister's hand. "Don't touch me. I'll catch stupid from you." Soon after that, Lula went into a coma. On Sunday, Irene signed the forms that allowed the tired young man in blue scrubs to switch off her sister's ventilator. The machine ceased its wheezing. Irene slept in a chair by her bed while it happened. She didn't want Lula to be alone. Lula died on Tuesday. For a few moments afterward, her body still seemed tinnited. Then, something was gone. Irene went back to the home that they had shared for 40 years. The bus stop was a mile away. Irene had no umbrella. She tied her plastic scarf tight, bowed her head to the cold darts of rain, and began her cautious shuffle. Irene imagined her arthritis as a black slug that lived in the crevices of her joints. It glutted itself on cold, wet. It swelled, filled the spaces of her, slowed her to a deathly pace. The carcass of a shopping trolley listed on the bald verge. Torn plastic fluttered in strips, ghost fingers. Towers rose black in the night, freckled with bright pinpricks. Fairy lights cast colorful halos on drawn curtains. It was almost Christmas. Irene tried not to flinch as she went at the deep shadows that might conceal hostile eyes, watching her slow progress. Hands, chains, sticks, blades. Such things happened. Irene scolded herself. She could not run. Fear served no purpose. Cowardy pudding custard, Lula had sometimes called her. Fat, cowardy, milky pudding. Irene greeted their familiar yellow door with relief. Her knees were molten. She made tea with turmeric and ginger for the arthritis, took aspirin. Next to the aspirin was an unopened bottle of whiskey, given years before by a neighbor. Alcohol is a weakness, Lula used to say. Those who drink it have no iron at their core. After a moment's thought, Irene opened the bottle. The scent sliced sharp at her nostrils. She took the whiskey tea upstairs, step by careful step. Lula's room smelled of despair and eucalyptus. She was bedridden before the cancer raised its black pennant for the final assault. Irene had given Lula a little brass bell to ring when she needed something. Lula rang it day and night. You are too fat to come up the stairs, too slow when I ring. Irene grew to dread the pretty tinkle. Lula's childhood nickname had been Lulabelle. Irene hadn't thought of it in years. How amusing! She shook out a rubbish bag with a joyful crack. The bin for you, Lulabelle, she whispered, dropping it in. She laughed to herself. In went Lula's clothes, the bright patterned leggings she liked, the collection of teddy bears staring with beetle eyes. Irene hated teddy bears. In went the yellowed sheets, thin after many boiling washes, mounds of graying tissues, gossip magazines, pages soft with use. Irene took a long drink of turmeric whiskey tea. It really did help with the pain. No wonder people said it was medicinal. When she had finished, the room was strange. The bedstead bare, the skeleton of an ancient beast picked clean. With the mattress gone, the seeping stain on the floor was prominent, dark. Sometimes when Irene was out shopping or at the post office, Lula could not wait for the bathroom. She went where she lay. Afterwards, Lula crawled out of the wet sheets, under the bed, and curled up in her urine-soaked nightdress to sleep on the boards. Irene thought that if Lula could get herself that far, she could have made it to the bathroom. Lula's room was Irene's now. She could have a lodger. She imagined a nice young man, perhaps a student of some interesting subject, like archaeology. She would cook for him. He would tell her about excavations. Imagine having company that was not Lula. It would mean money. She could go on holiday. She thought of sunshine and parrots and white-capped waves, glassy deeps, coral waving in unseen currents. Her knees didn't hurt her at all as she dragged the black bags down the stairs, out of the back door to the bin. She poured herself more whiskey. She hummed as she drank it in bed, squinting at Nicholas Nickleby. She always read Dickens at Christmas time. Little urchins, dust piles, missing heirs, fog that stalked the world like a monster. Sleep came gently without interrupting her thought. Coming, Irene murmured. Hush, hush, I'm coming now. She surfaced sadly, pulled from a dream where warm arms held her and she was deeply kissed by lips that tasted of meringue. Irene loved meringue. She sat up. The room was as dark as it ever got. The streetlight on the far side of the close burned through the thin curtains like a vengeful moon. The whiskey had become something foul. It lined her eyes and mouth and nose, pulsing, astringent. Irene rubbed her head. It came again, the sound that had woken her. She stilled, hand on her aching brow. It could not be. Cold fingers walked up and down her spine. Once more from the empty room, it sounded, the imperious tinkle of a little bell. Irene's lips parted. Her heart was a warm plum in her mouth. The bell rang. Coming, Irene breathed before she could stop herself. Years of habit. She stood before Lula's door. Inside, it went on. Tinkle, tinkle. She promised herself that she would not scream. "Lula?" Irene whispered. "Sister?" The knob was slippery in her palm. The door yielded with a creak, swung wide. Bare of curtains, Lula's room was flooded with ashy yellow streetlight. All seemed as usual. The bed frame, white and spectral in the corner. Beneath it, the dark stain. The scuffed walls, the slight catch of eucalyptus lingering in the air. Irene stood, fists clenched white. She waited. Her knees ached, trembled. Nothing. No sound but the wet shh, shh of her heart. At last Irene gave a little woofing sigh. Shame flooded her. She should not have drunk that whiskey. She was not used to it. Exhaustion, the grief of the day, she was confused. It was natural, a waking dream. She turned to go back to bed. A shrill tinkle rang out behind. She turned, flesh thrilling. Beneath the bed, the stain was moving. It shifted in patterns of dark on dark. 2 eyes, the plane of a cheek, the curve of a chin. It was a face made of shadow, and Irene knew whose it was. Lula's voice was that of creaking timber, wildfire. She said her sister's name the old way. In Lula's dark eye sockets were tiny pupils of flame. Irene's slippered feet moved without her will towards the smoky outline of her sister's face. It was a natural thing, both right and true, to go to Lula, to be a part of her. Lula's mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide to receive Irene, a snake dislocating its jaw. From the yawning depths of her throat, there came a brassy tinkling. A long, black tongue flickered about her lips. The world began to tear in half. Something shrill and terrible rang out, ululating, drowning out the bell. Irene had broken her promise to herself, for she was screaming. She ran from the disembodied head of her sister, which formed and scattered on the bedroom floor, calling with her bell voice for Irene to come down into the darkness. Irene sucked on a boiled sweet. That helped. Her head ached all the time now since the ringing had begun 3 weeks earlier. It went on day and night. She drank a little more whiskey. That helped too. She was stiff from sitting on the floor, back against the door. Her swollen knees burned. She imagined the slug within, fat and preening. The bell rang on, each peal a dent in her skull. She slept lightly in the odd intervals when the bell stopped. She went to stores every few days, but she was jumpy, irrational. She thought she saw a man and woman following her. Faces slid as if melting. Everywhere she went, she heard the bell ringing. "Oh, Dio Kupara, I don't understand," Irene said tearfully to the thing behind the door. Arabic and English had begun to slide into one another. "You don't like me, or this house, or anything in this life. Why don't you go?" Inside the room, the bell rang on. Whether in answer or indifference, she could not say. Irene knew better than to open the door. It was not safe. The sucking mouth, the hungry dark, the sound of the world tearing. Instead, she beat on the wood with her fist. "Why are you here?" she shrieked. "Etrukini liwahidi, leave me alone." The little bell rang on and on. Irene blew her nose on her skirt. She wondered how long she would last without going mad. Perhaps it had already happened. She sat upright. She must have slept. Night had come. The dark, silken. The street lamp was out. Silence. No bell. What woke her? Irene heard it then. The crunch and tinkle of glass. A panel in the yellow front door giving to a fist. She could picture it. The gloved hand reaching carefully through. Sure enough, in a moment it came. The sound of the key turning slowly in the lock. The door swung open. A quiet male voice said, "All right?" Another answered, unintelligible. Knowledge of danger flooded Irene like dye. She tried to stand. Her joints blazed. She mouthed silent curses. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Downstairs, footsteps. Irene pulled herself across the hallway floor to her bedroom. She slid over to the window. Her fingers shuddered and slipped, useless on the latch. But then she had it, and the window swung open, letting in the good night. The yard looked very concrete. Far away. How long was the drop? 18 feet, perhaps? Irene grasped the windowsill and strained to haul herself upright. As she did, gloved hands took her shoulders. They pulled her gently away from the window. Irene fell to the floor with a painful thump. Two shapes bent over her, giant against the dark. They wore ski masks. Irene considered screaming. She looked at the hunting knife, shining in a fist. She did not scream. "What do you want?" Her voice was not her own, but that of a frightened old woman. "Tie her up," the large man said. When the second figure came close, Irene saw that it was a woman. She lifted Irene onto the bed with little trouble. She taped her wrists to the bedpost. Irene started at each crack of the tape. "Please don't hurt me," she said. The woman hit her on the temple, and everything trailed fiery stars. "This isn't for pleasure," the woman said. "We need to make an example, or we'll have more and more of your kind coming over here." Irene was flooded with relief. "There has been a misunderstanding," she said to the woman. "I was born here." That was what she meant to say. What came out was a wet moan. "This isn't personal," the woman said again. The man stood over Irene. "You don't have to watch this part," he said to the woman. She nodded and turned away. He lit a candle stub and put it on top of Irene's copy of A Christmas Carol. He stuffed handfuls of gauze into her mouth. He pulled down the neck of her blouse and rested the point of his knife below her collarbone. The knife was sharp, and when he began to cut, her flesh parted like butter. Irene was glad of the gag because the pain was bad, and she was ashamed to cry out in front of them. At last, it was finished. "Show her," said the woman. She had watched after all. The man brought Irene the little hand mirror that she kept on the chest of drawers. It had pink roses on the back and around the rim. He held it up so she could see. Irene blinked away tears. She stared. He had carved the symbol into her breast. It was an old sign. Irene knew what it meant. Everyone did. The intersecting arms, the cross. Softly, from the neighboring room, a little bell began to ring. The man paused with Irene's rose-patterned mirror in his gloved fist. "She's alone," the woman said. "We watched all week." The man put down the mirror and gathered Irene's throat gently in his hand. "Who's here?" he said. He took off the gag so she could answer. "My sister," said Irene, mouth strange and numb. "Please, don't hurt her. She is ill. She has no money, nothing valuable. Leave her alone." Irene made her eyes flicker quickly, like the actors on EastEnders did when their character was lying. "She has nothing," she said again. The bell tinkled, insistent. The man put the gag back in her mouth. "You watch her," he said to the woman. "I'll go." "We don't know who's in there." She took his arm. "Together, remember?" He touched her face gently through the balaclava. They went. Irene heard Lula's door open. The tinkling rose. The door closed. The world tore. Irene felt it in her body. A hole opened in the fabric of things. A terrible passage. Wrongness enveloped her. Black covered the world. She gasped, cried out, and fainted to the sound of the ringing bell. Irene woke in silence, in guttering candlelight. The only sound was of wax dripping onto A Christmas Carol. The book would be quite ruined. She knew that she was alone in the house. Irene began to work her wrists patiently against the tape. Irene stands in the doorway of her dead sister's bedroom. The black stain under the bed is gone. There is no sign of the man or the woman. Irene is the only living thing here. Outside, the wind moves in close. Shukran habibate, she says. Thank you, Lulabelle. Irene remembers a day when she and Lula were just girls, holding hands by the banks of a stream which ran brown in the morning sun. Each curve and wavelet limed with light, when their father put one hand on each of their heads, and they knew that they were loved. Irene knows the bell will not ring again, except perhaps once, years from now. Until then, she must learn to live alone.
As we say goodbye, and perhaps good riddance to 2020, our own library ghoul was inspired to write this short poem.
Ode to the dumpster fire that is 2020. The year started great with high expectations, but quickly moved on to lots of frustrations. Never before have we seen in the past our patience for people leave us so fast. The hoarding, the malice, the screaming so loud, the whining, the complaining, and more than 10 people a crowd. People taking all the cleaners out of the store. The same individuals never used them before. No toilet paper, no soap, no hand sanitizer. You'd think after 3 months some people would be wiser. The virus, they say, the mask would help if you wore it. And then came along the big murder hornet. All the time wasted, the trips that were canceled, all the while being told that they have it handled. This year's about over. It's time for it to pass. 2020, you sucked. Now you can kiss my Happy New Year!
I've so enjoyed your energy tonight. But alas, all good things must come to an end. We must say goodbye for now, but only until next time. And until then, be nice to spiders. Have tea with the ghost in your attic. And don't forget to feed the monster under your bed. Good night.